Hi, it's your friend Riley from Los Angeles. Last week I promised that I would talk about my trip to Belarus. As mentioned last week, Belarus is nestled sweetly between Poland and Russia, which is a very historically interesting place to sit. It has a population of Belarusians and Russians mainly. I went there because my boyfriend is Russian and that's where he grew up. To a certain point. If you ask him, he's from Austin. Everyone who has ever lived in Texas for longer than 30 seconds is a die-hard Texan. So I want to tell you a little bit about my trip to Belarus, which was a cultural experience. And then I'll sum up at the end with, again, what lesson did I learn from my European travels? The very first thing that I noticed that I did upon arrival in Belarus, well, we weren't even off the plane yet, and we got trundled onto a bus. I was fine with the first bus. Okay, we're going from the plane, which was not a huge plane. It was a plane that went from France to Belarus. It was not a massive plane. So I'll go from a plane to a bus. We went from this bus for about 20 minutes on this bus to another bus, which then took us to a third bus. And at this point, we've done 2 bus changes, if you've been keeping count. The airport wasn't that big. I swear we circled the damn thing. We drove off into a field, into a forest for a little bit, came back. Finally, after bus number 3, we get dropped off at a point where we then have to walk actually into the airport. And it was at this moment where I started thinking to myself, they don't care here that I want to get anywhere fast. They don't care about me at all. And this is, I think, a funny thing to realize when you are traveling is just how customer centric, not even, just how how getting you through as fast as possible with as little time to talk to anyone as possible things are in the US. Like, I am very used, you get to the airport, you get on the plane. Like, LAX is a huge, massive airport. You can get into the airport and onto a plane in like 25 minutes if you time that shit right. Like, that is epic. This was not the case in the Belarus airport. They did not give a single damn that I wanted to get anywhere quickly. And I just, tried to start resigning myself to that fact right off the bat. I find that I mentioned this in my last set when I talked about, just disappointing everyone when I travel. I know a little bit of Russian. I took a little bit in college because I wanted to read Russian literature, and my family several generations back is ethnically Russian, which I thought was really cool until I met my actual Russian boyfriend, and he explained to me that it doesn't count if your family came from Russia before like 1900. So that's fine. I was still trying to learn it a little bit, but I didn't retain a whole lot. I've been doing Duolingo and, having the little green bird yell at me on my phone. But I had enough to do like a very basic introductory conversation with people. So I was like, I'm going to be polite and say hello in the language of choice for this country because I'm a good traveler and I'm doing my best. So I walked up to the border check lady and handed her, she says passport, because luckily that word is the same in both English and Russian. I had seen the people before me walk up and just say "Здравствуйте," which is basically a very formal hello. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm doing my best. But it's basically a very formal hello. And I was like, I can do that. I know that word. I know what that means. So she says passport, and I hand it to her and I say "Здравствуйте." And then she just rattles off a string of noises that were Russian and were not covered in my 3 semesters. I learned how to say what major I was studying, and I learned how to spell a couple things. I did not learn whatever the border check lady was saying to me. So it was a very sad moment as I stood there just staring at her. Like, are they not going to let me into this country because I lied about how much Russian I could speak? And so I just very sadly said, Angliski, пожалуйста, which means English, please. And it was just a total admitting of defeat. And she looked so, well, actually, I would like to say she looked disheartened or disappointed, but that's not, Russians don't really have like a more disappointed in you facial expression. They just kind of look like you've behaved exactly as they expected and things are as they thought they would be. So she didn't look particularly disappointed. She just kind of shook her head and then switched to English. So that was my welcome to Belarus, just right off the bat, making friends with the locals. My boyfriend's dad came to pick us up, so a big part of this trip was he got to see his family and I got to meet his family, which, as you know, is a stressful enough proposition when you know how to speak the language that your boyfriend's parents are speaking. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, actually, because I realized very quickly that his dad was, you know how when your parents are talking to somebody who doesn't really know English, if your parents are like this, I shouldn't assume your parents are foreign racist, but sometimes people do this. Well, they will talk to a person who does not understand English, and instead of recognizing that this is an intelligent person who just does not know the language that you're trying to talk, and really is, there's no reason that they have to know it, they will just start yelling at them as if the problem is volume and not just knowing and just that they've never learned the language. Yeah, so that's very quickly. I realized that his dad was had the attitude to me of, oh, what a sad, dumb American. She doesn't even know Russian. So he would try very hard to speak as slowly as possible and enunciate, which did not help me because even if you speak slowly in Russian and enunciate it, it's still like the speed, like if English is spoken at the speed that you go on the highway, Russian sounds like it's spoken at like a NASCAR level. Like that like they are fast because there's so many consonants in every damn word and so many syllables that they have to do it fast or it would take too long. So even when he was slowly enunciating for my dumbass, I was still totally lost. I was grasping at whatever I could do, but then it was funny, just the things that he picked to try to like, he was very nice about trying to talk to me. He felt very sorry for me in my deprived childhood that completely lacked any Russian education, clearly. So he was very nicely trying to speak to me. And the only word I caught was Erlonskaya, which is basically like an Irish woman. And I was like, I whispered to my boyfriend, I'm like, he said something about being Irish. I, at some point in my life, in my ancestry, somebody's been Irish. Is this something I can like talk about? And my boyfriend's like, oh, he's saying like, he's saying that your family is Irish, right? You've mentioned that before. And I was like, yeah, and he's saying that he's been there and he thinks it's beautiful. And I'm like, oh God, now I just feel like a poser again. I have been to Ireland. My family just assumes that we're Irish because at some point some of us lived in Rhode Island a long time ago. And that pretty much means that your family's Irish. So now I'm not, I disappointed the border patrol lady and now I'm making up an Irish ancestry. I'm just failing at speaking any Russian. So then we, get in the car. And yeah, we haven't even left the airport yet, and I'm just disappointing the Russians left and right. We're having a nice drive in. I'm feeling a little calmer now because nobody's trying to talk to me. And no one's really trying to talk. You don't get a lot of small talk with Russians. I've noticed. Like, if my family meets someone for the first time, when my parents met my boyfriend, they did not stop talking. There were stories and jokes and nervous laughter and let me get you, like, let me buy you something, and like activities. Everything had to have something to fill every single silence. And this car ride was the silence. And that's just something that, the more that I travel, the more my stereotypes are kind of upheld and just tweaked. Russians don't need you to talk to them. They don't need you to entertain them. They're fine. Again, like I said last time, if you are Russian or you know Russians and you think I'm terribly wrong, go ahead and shout me out on social media. I'm at Cold Fever right now on most platforms, Cold with a K. Tell me I'm wrong, because the more you talk about me, the more press I get and the more people see my shows. So go ahead and yell at me. So we're driving towards, his dad had very nicely offered to let us use one of his apartments. I guess he had one apartment that was like in the center of town and one that was a little more out of town, and he lived in the one that was a little more out of town with his person and several children that he had with this person. I did not ask a lot of questions about the arrangement. I couldn't ask a lot of questions because I don't know the language. So we were driving towards this and we see this like massive monument. His dad starts talking. Genna's translating for me. Genna is my boyfriend. And he is very good about translating for me. I can't tell you how nice that was. That he translated for me the whole trip, which must have been exhausting. Like, to have to listen to everything and then interpret it and like feed it back in English fast enough that I don't get, like, my social anxiety doesn't like make the top of my head pop off, like giving me enough to make me feel like I'm understanding what's happening. Must have been a lot for the trip, but he did a great job. And he tells me, he's like, oh, that's a World War II memorial. And that's where we went on a field trip there when we were in school. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Wow, it's a huge memorial. I'm like, what a neat thing. That's probably, it's good that you guys, it's good to have, one of those. That's a vapid statement. But, what I mean is, I assumed that World War II was important when you were snuggled in between Poland and Russia. I did not realize how all-encompassing culturally World War II was gonna be to Belarus. This was but this was my first World War II memorial that we saw as we approached. Then we made it to, yes, that's right, we have not yet made it to our lodgings. We finally make it to the place, and I kind of expected his dad to kind of just drop us off and, let us get some rest. We just gotten off the plane. We knew that the next morning we were going to go get brunch with his family, so I thought we'd have the night to kind of chill out before we went and did that. But then when we were grabbing all our bags and stuff, his dad was taking us up, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense that he would come up with us to like, but it like his dad also like brought his stuff. And that's when I started to get a little suspicious. And we were standing in the elevator to go up to the apartment, and we opened the door to what I had been told was an empty apartment that we could use for our trip. And a small giggling child comes running around the corner. And then a rush of other people, and I realized that we have been brought to the place where Genna's dad lives with his 2 kids and their mother in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm wondering at this point, why are we here right now? I have all my bags, and his dad is bringing the bags into the apartment. And then I realized I'd been bamboozled.